Hey guys, welcome back to another video, and today we're going to be taking a look at this dual dash cam setup that's in 4K and 2K. One thing I can appreciate right away is the easy to open packaging. Being able to slide off a cover and open a box certainly makes it nicer for consumers in a general sense and gives it a little more refined feel. Now when opening the box, we'll see what we have inside. And immediately we're greeted with what I assume is the front-facing camera, and it certainly is. And this is what it looks like. Looks like we have a small 2-inch display on the back. Instead of having a touchscreen, we have buttons along the bottom, which helps to reduce the cost of the camera, as well as it's one less thing to go wrong, especially for a camera that'll be sitting out on your windshield. You can expect UV damage across the screen, especially if you're poking it a lot, but since you have control buttons across the bottom, this ought to help protect it, as well as leaving your screen cover on. Now, in addition to this, we have another white box. We'll move this styrofoam out of the way first. And in this box, and there's our instruction manual, we'll go ahead and set that to the side. I assume we're going to have connection cables, our back-facing camera, among a few other things, and that certainly seems to be the case here. So this is our rear-facing camera, and this is going to be a 2K camera. Looks like we're going to have a bit of unique mounting system for this, so that may be a pro or con. Personally, I like something that's very adaptable, therefore GoPro mounts are something that has something, or you're able to connect to a GoPro mount. So we have our two cameras along with a connection cable. So this will go from the back camera to the front camera, and it looks to be about 20 feet in length, which ought to reach most vehicles, especially when it comes to sedans or mid-size and full-size pickups. We'll have to see how it does on medium-size SUVs, and when it comes to large SUVs, this may be something to consider and maybe a little too short. Now, we have a GPS signal detector and the main charger for the camera, which plugs into a 12 volt. Now, if you prefer not to plug it into a 12 volt, there are other adapters out there in which you can splice these wires and directly connect it to either your fuse box, so you have parking mode and allows the camera to charge while parking, or you can simply connect it directly to the battery. These are things that they don't look like they come in this box, but they can be bought separately for relatively cheap. It's an option that some people go if they have this camera or other cameras professionally installed. Now finally, looks like we have a suction cup pad on the back. These are relatively good, except in really high temperatures. Sometimes you'll have to put a little moisture on the back of these to get them to stick quite well. And then these small tabs which will hold the rear camera in place. Finally, and this is quite a nice touch, is a little car tool, and this just allows you to pry on plastic pieces so that you can run the wire underneath other pieces of your car rather than have it strewn everywhere. We'll show you that in a little bit. Overall, the quality of the camera is reasonable, but it is quite light. And the reason I assume this is one, the lithium battery it uses, and two, it's a relatively small battery. So when it comes to parking mode or parking guard, you're going to probably get a couple hours performance out of this camera before it dies. If you plan on parking in a parking garage for an extended period of time, say 3, 4, 5 days, you certainly may want to consider adapter cables that directly go into a fuse or hook up to a 12 volt battery in your vehicle. Like I said, relatively inexpensive to do. Now, the sensor on this camera is supposed to be rated for 4K. However, it is a relatively small sensor. We're certainly going to look at low light performance later in this video, but overall, you don't expect DSLR quality out of a small camera like this. You have to come with this with reasonable and practical expectations. We will be comparing this camera to that of another small sensor camera, which is a GoPro. Now, the other thing I must note is that you need a U3 class card on these devices. U3 is a relatively high performance card, generally speaking. I try to run them in my GoPros as well as other things, such as my drone. Turning it on, comes on relatively quickly. We get the logo of the company and everything. And I have my settings already placed onto this camera. and I'm not going to go into what those settings specifically are, but I will leave them down in the description below, as well as a link to this camera so that you may check it out. In the few months I've owned a dash cam, this is just one of a few instances where a vehicle pulled out in front of me that should have yielded even though I had a green light and had to avoid it. If I were in a wreck, I could definitely take this as evidence that I was not at fault. Or at night when I was going through this construction area, an impaired driver possibly was going towards me in an oncoming lane, and that could have been a very dangerous situation if he was not paying attention. When installing the camera and adding the wiring, usually you go back behind the glove box and then go up the A-pillar. This will change by car, so you probably need to find a tutorial online for your specific model. Follow the headliner directly down to the camera and this will keep the wires out of the way. The rear camera has a very poor mounting system, so on flat glass it does not mount well. The GoPro Hero 8 is the standard when it comes to small camera sensors generally and quality. You can see road markings here, other vehicles and their make, as well as traffic lights. The Ricilar, you can do the same, however, the image is a little bit blown out. It's a bit too bright, so you don't get nearly as crisp a detail, but you can still see turning lanes, the type of vehicles that are around you, as well as the color of light, the yield sign, etc. The rear camera actually does a little bit better with ISO. It's not quite as crisp of an image. It's only a 2K sensor and it's a very small sensor at that, but you can still see the vehicle behind you and the type and make and model of it, especially in an accident. This is another instance where you can see vehicles coming in behind you and just gives you an idea that this is not a very good mounting system and they should improve this for flat glass on the back of vehicles. Now, with ambient lighting, the GoPro Hero 8 is adequate. You can still see signals, road markings, obviously the police car that's on that side, cones, things of that nature. However, with less ambient lighting and only the headlights, it starts to degrade quickly. You can't see far in front of you. The Ricilar unfortunately has a bit of a blown out image, but you are able to see much more. So even though it's a bit blown out, you still are able to see all the markings. Same thing with the 2K camera. You can see all these vehicles around you in ambient lighting, as well as other vehicles coming towards you. So not too bad. Now, where this really shines is it does very well with that higher ISO setting when driving roads that aren't nearly as well lit, which is always good. And the Ricilar, you can still see vehicles behind you, as well as some of those road markings as they're coming by, and that might help your case as well. Now, after taking that test footage, I played around with the ISO and a couple other settings, and I got a much better image out of the front-facing camera, something I am very happy with. The sharpness is a little too high for me. I prefer a lower sharpness because it just helps smooth and blend a little bit better, but that's really my only major complaint for this one. Now, overall, the Ricilar is a relatively good dash cam. It's at a reasonable point, and it offers a front and facing rear camera. There's a major flaw there, but we'll get there in a second. But the camera itself, with its G sensors, being able to monitor impacts and save videos, as well as do time loops, and parking monitor if you're willing to take the extra steps, these are all great features you want in a dash cam. And 4K is just going to give you a little bit better quality than 1080p, so you have a little bit more visual representation. Now, the only area where the Ricilar relatively failed is the rear dash cam, but not because of the quality of the camera itself, but the mounting system they added. It is not a great design for trucks that have flat glass on the back, or vehicles like SUVs that have flat glass. The mounting system is set up so it's for sedans with long arching glass, or for you to go right to the back of the vehicle and put it right over your license plate tag. Now, that's a little bit of annoying. I'm not going to be doing that in a mid-size pickup. That's too much wire to run. So I would love to see another suction cup mount, so where you can put it flat against that back glass, have it up high, so you have way better visuals. If they would change that, this really would be a great setup. Now guys, I do hope you enjoyed this video. Hopefully you learned a few things, and if you did, please make sure to share, like, subscribe for more. And if you're interested in this camera, just check it out down in the description. Thanks for watching.